I'm Jeffrey Boker, representing Parade Rest, Virginia, and I'm here today to interview Jack Bertram, a World War II veteran. This interview is part of the Veterans History Project for the Library of Congress. The date is June 3rd, 2015, and we are doing this interview at Mr. Bertram's home. With us operating the camera is Tyler Lystash, and also with us is Mr. Bertram's wife, June. Are you ready, sir?
Yes, sir.
Then let's begin. Please state your full name.
My full name is John C. Bertram.
And the C stands for?
Chalmer.
Okay.
My father's name.
When and where were you born?
I was born in Altoona, Pennsylvania in November 11th, 1920.
What were your parents' names and their occupations?
My mother's name was Elsie, and my father's name was Chalmer. And my father was a barber, the most prominent barber in town. And in those days, the barber shops were a resting place, a collection of friends, people stopping by. And his shop was near the railroad shops. Altoona was in the 1920s to 30s, huge steam railway. And so the men would stop in his barber shop on the way to work, or more so on the way back from work.
Did you have any brothers or sisters?
I have two brothers. They're both deceased. They were, the oldest one is 3 years older, and the next one is a year and a half older than I.
What were their names?
My oldest brother's name was Russell, and he also was a pilot in World War II, stateside. He never got to combat, and my brother Dick, who I was very close to, was also in the Air Force, and he was a crew chief of B-25 in Greenville, South Carolina.
So where were you living then when the war broke out?
When the war broke out, I think I was in Dayton, Ohio. I was in a technical school in Dayton, Ohio.
Do you remember where you heard the news about Pearl Harbor?
I do not. No, I don't. I don't remember. There was so much going on. I don't remember the specific day or where I was and so on.
Do you remember how it made you feel?
I'm sorry?
Do you remember how it made you feel when you heard about it?
Well, we knew, the feeling was there. We knew that we were going to go to war. We all felt like we were going to go to war. And of course, when our country was attacked, and it was, everybody was ready then for war. There was no laggers. Yeah.
When you say you feel that we were going to go to war, do you mean before even Pearl Harbor? That was the feeling?
Yeah. Well, the news in Europe was very, very bad, getting worse, and so it seemed inevitable that we were going to get involved.
And in which branch of the military did you serve, sir?
I was drafted into the field artillery, and ended up in taking basic training in Fort Bragg, North Carolina. It's monstrous base. And I took basic training on the 105 millimeter howitzer, and had just about finished basic training, and my oldest brother was in the Air Force, was an air cadet, and wrote and told me, about an air cadet exam that might be able to take it if there was a base there. Well, Pope Field is on Fort Bragg, and has been, the headquarters base for the 82nd Airborne then and still today. So anyway, I showed this note to my officer, and he said, "Well, I'll look into it." And so about a week later, I got to take the test, and I passed it. And then I was reassigned as an air cadet, waiting for orders. You know.
What was that test like? What kind of things did they ask you about? The air cadet
test?
Yeah.
Oh, it was very general, you know, and just covered a little bit about everything, you know, psychological and not so much academic, but they were just a lot of questions to find out who you are and that sort of thing.
Where did you go after that for training?
And of course, you had to take a physical, yes. And after basic training in Fort Bragg in the field artillery, I was in A1 condition, which was a. So from there we went. I was sent to Nashville, Tennessee, and that was the what to call that center, but it was one center in the Eastern Command and one in the West, and this was for the selecting process of whether you're going to be a bombardier, pilot, or navigator. So you went in there, as I recall, there were like 6,000 in there. And you get all kinds of tests, you know, eye tests, physical, psychological, you name it, everything. And in fact, I spent the first Christmas there, and the place was quarantined because somebody came in with spinal meningitis. We spent our first Christmas on the base there. But yeah, it was an exciting time. You know, there were thousands in there that were coming from colleges and places like that. So I had an advantage over them physically because I was in good physical condition. So you go through all this process, and then eventually, well, almost daily, they would post things on a bulletin board telling, you know, what the results were. And so there were tears of joy and tears of sorrow. Everybody wanted to be a pilot, and of course, if you weren't selected for a pilot, it was not a happy time. And so it was, you know, it was tense in some ways and a lot of fun, met a lot of people, whatever.
So you were happy when you found out you'd been selected to be a pilot?
Oh, unbelievable. Unbelievable, they're going to make me a pilot.
And did you flew B-17s during the war, did you choose to fly multi-engine aircraft, or were you assigned to the kind of plane you would fly?
No, I chose to fly multiple engine. Right. I did my aerobatics, and you know, there wasn't a problem. I was as good as anybody else, I guess, or most of them, but I didn't really, I like to fly distances, see things, and so on.
So you chose to fly the B-17?
Well, I went to, you know, after basic training they split. And you either went to multiple engine training or to single fighter training. So in basic training I went to multiple engine, which was 2 engine planes training. And then after I got my wings and commission, you know, I was assigned to fly a B-17, and that was probably my biggest excitement, unbelievable in the whole process, training and everything. They're going to let me fly this thing. It was the biggest plane there was.
So you were hoping you would get B-17s?
Pardon me?
You were hoping to be assigned to B-17s?
Well, I don't know. I don't know really, you know, whether I was or not. I just, you know, everybody was hoping for the best because they, you know, you could be assigned C-47 pulling gliders. I mean, there's a multitude of things you could be doing. So that, to me, that was the key assignment you could get. So,
Once you were selected to fly B-17s, where did you go to do that training?
well, I went to Chanute Field in outside of Chicago, Champaign-Urbana, and that's an old World War I field, and we were the first people that were training in there. And this is a true story. They would not let us in the officers' club. I mean, we just got our shiny wings and our gold bars, and we were out to try it. We went up there, and they would not let us in the officers' club. So they set up a separate room for us. I don't know how many we had up there training. They weren't great, huge numbers, but so we were in our own confines, doing our own thing.
Did they tell you why they wouldn't let you go in the officers' club?
Well, they just looked down on us. Here we were, snotty young guys. Not, but figured we didn't know how to behave. I guess, I don't know, that's the whole scenario. But they weren't in a war yet up there. By the time we left, they were in it. No, we were. That was a bitter, cold, early cold winter, and we flew those things. They had to heat the engines to start them. It was really zero weather and so on. So we flew in weather that I wouldn't fly in today, guarantee you. And so it was intense training. But
Do you remember what it felt like when the first time you flew a B-17 in training?
yeah, I remember the first mission very well because instructor usually took two of us. One would be in a co-pilot seat and the other would be down in the nose, the plexiglass nose. And once you fly it down in there, then you have more appreciation for the navigator and bombardier in combat training. So the first thing he did was take us up and stalled it. We stalled it. I mean, it took two of us, to hold the thing. And he wanted to show us how reliable it was and how much movement you could get on the tail and wings. And so we actually stalled that thing. And so I never forgot that.
Recovering from your first stall.
Well, it's stalled fairly stable. It wasn't. Some single engine planes have a lot of torque, and when they stall, they whip. The minute they stall, and then you have to grab hold of it and straighten it out, walk it down, and so on. But big four-engine plane like that, if you had a couple engines out on one side and stalled, then that'd be something different.
I wanted to ask you. From a pilot's perspective, how was the B-17 to fly? What was that like?
B-17 was a very stable airplane, and it just, it was a busy time flying it. Militarily, you don't fly anything unless you have a checklist. You have a checklist when you take off, you have a checklist when you land, and so on. So there were bigger checklists, more things involved. You had to learn more about all aspects of the plane. It had a lot of individual motors that controlled flaps, wheels, all kind of things. So you had to know where they were, and but we'd done quite a bit of flying. When we went into transition for the B-17, so we knew something about flying, but the biggest thing you had to learn about B-17 and flying is instruments. Instrument flying is is the key to safety. Most all the accidents you see around here, private planes, are because they can't fly instruments, and they get in a little bad weather and they don't know what to do, and as a result of that, they lose control of the plane. So we did a lot of training on instrument flying, and thank God we did, because when we got to England, we used a lot of it. So,
Because of the weather?
Weather and taking off at night, and take off at night is strictly an instrument. No lights in England. The place is not lit up. Total darkness.
Did it take a lot of physical effort to fly the B-17 as a pilot?
No, it did not take a lot of physical. No, it took more concentration, more mental involvement. Plane was not a difficult plane to fly.
Anything else that stands out to you in terms of your memories of training? Your training?
Oh, I think in different. We started out in primary in flying off grass fields with civilian instructors and just a few military men on the base, and they were test pilots were military. So I was in Cape Girardeau, Missouri, and it was right on the Mississippi River, which helped us navigation-wise, because you're up there flying and you're concentrating, training, and military pilot training is has a concentration of what's the word I want to use? Emergency procedures. You constantly, you're flying, you're with an instructor, and you're concentrating on a maneuver or whatever he's asking you to do, and suddenly he cuts the engine. He just cuts the engine, and now you have to know where you are, which way the wind is coming. You have to find a field to set the thing down in. You go through all this procedure. So, yeah. And in addition to that, you have to know if there's anybody else in the air. You can't make a maneuver unless you look up, down, left, and right, because there's a lot of planes out there flying. And so with that type of a procedure, those things that there was always an alertness. It wasn't like you were up there just cruising around, looking at the clouds. There was always something going on. So it was, taught you to concentrate and know where you are, what you're doing. And so a lot of fun involved in it too,
Any humorous thing you remember from training?
Well, I was never killed, but a lot of people talk about soloing, being the height of everything. Well, soloing at night was more thrilling than the soloing in the daytime. Soloing in the daytime, you had made that run many times with an instructor. When we got to basic training, we went into night flying, and they had radios in the car, in the plane, and so when we went soloed at night, we had flown with an instructor, and we made one landing with him, and he couldn't wait to get out. And then they put us up in quadrants, at 500 feet height, and and they called us in one at a time to land. And so solo landing at night, I thought was a bigger thrill than the original one. So when I made my solo landing at night, I felt it was a decent landing and so on. And when I taxied off the runway into the taxi strips, and of course it's night, all the power went out on my plane except the motor, right? Except the engine. All the lights, electric, everything went out. The radio went out. So I just pulled over into the grass and shut the engine off and got out of the thing, walked away. And of course they know what planes came down, and so they knew I was missing. They finally found it and then found me. So a lot of things. Yeah, night flying eventually I learned to love to fly at night, just actually love it. But the first solo cross country they did at night. They had 3 legs. You didn't land, but when you got there was communication set up that you were on the first leg and so on. So that was a thrill, to be out. I mean, the first leg of that flight was over. I was down in Arkansas, and the first leg of that was over Memphis, Tennessee. Yeah, Memphis. And they said, well, there's a ball game going on there. The place is lit up. No, we don't want any planes over there. We might as well told everybody, make sure you stop. Go fly over there. Everybody took a look. Yeah. Well, primary training was, was exciting because, some of us had never been in a plane in their life. I went in, when I was 16, I took a ride in a barnstormer, much to my mother's chagrin, for $5. You're up there 15 or 20 minutes. And that's the only time I'd ever been in a plane in my life. So you go out there, you're going to fly this thing, They all look big. It doesn't matter. A primary trainer looked pretty big if you're going to fly it yourself. So the tension was you never knew whether you were going to make it or not. 50% of the class washed out. So, left and right, this fellow's going, this fellow's going. So you felt like you were on the edge of not making it any time. So we had some academics, but not that much. We flew in the morning and had academics training in the afternoon. And,
I'm curious, was your ride in the barnstorming plane what made you want to be a pilot?
No, I never entered my mind of being a pilot. I took the ride. I wasn't one of those young people that got infatuated because I took a plane ride. And that didn't. I was more interested in baseball at the time, I think. So no, that didn't affect me.
Why did you want to be a pilot?
That really didn't happen to me. I mean, I was in the field artillery. I never thought about being a pilot. It never occurred to me that I'm going to be a pilot. I didn't. I knew my 2 brothers were in the Air Force, and I wished I had been drafted with them. I was supposed to be drafted with them, and the chairman of the draft board was my baseball coach in what's the league? Remembering the last baseball league, American Legion.
Oh.
American Legion, and that was big baseball leagues and different teams. So he was my coach and played for the American Legion. So I was out in school. He said, "Will you stay out there I'll call you when. So then one morning, Monday morning, they had a meeting at the school, and they read off half a dozen names that should be drafted, and I was one of them. So I was on a train about 5 hours later. So I got drafted. They were going to have a group draft in about 2 weeks, and I said, well, I'm not going to wait. So two of us just, went that day. They just put us on a train. We went by ourselves. So.
Did you find it easy or difficult to adjust to military life?
I had no problem adjusting to military life. I've always been a competitor, and so there were plenty of ways to compete, in basic training. A lot of things I didn't like about it, but I'd been away from home, which was a big advantage. I left home when I was 19, went to work in Pittsburgh, but 125 mile away and so on. Then went to school, and the difference in war today versus then, there were 16 million men that were in the service, and millions of those were drafted and had never been out of their room in their home still, and their mother was making their bed and cleaning their sheets, baking the meals, and suddenly they find themselves in a barracks with about 60 to 100 men with no privacy, none. And that's a shock. That's a culture shock. The latrines lined up, a big row of them, a row that they're facing each other. And so those things were hard to deal with. Some kids had trouble handling that, yeah.
Going back to your training, were there any accidents while you were training? In terms of the cadets?
Yeah, we had a lot of minor accidents. We had accidents in every field. I don't think we had anybody killed, but we had a lot of accidents. Looping planes. When you got to advance, you had wheels that retracted, and people would come down and land with the wheels up. All types of mental lapses and so on. And we had, the closest thing I had to an accident, we had an instructor that should have been a fighter pilot in advanced training. And I think he was a couple of years younger than I was, and he was pretty wild. But, so he would take 3 planes up and dogfight in the clouds and so on. And on one of those occasions, the plane I was flying with another cadet, and they have a canopy, the left and right canopy, and one of them flew off. One of the co-pilots just flew off because we were putting more pressure on the plane than we should have, diving. And so somewhere around Indianapolis, somebody got one of those in their yard. I never heard about it. So the instructor went down and paid off the ground crews. So when we came down, the thing would be covered up, and it didn't make a big issue.
When did you first meet your crew that you would have going overseas?
Well, when we finished our transition training on a B-17, we went from there to a base where crew collected, and we trained with them. So we were assigned to when we left Chinook up there, that was a funny scenario. You know, I said they wouldn't let us in the officers' club and so on, but our CEO, I think, was from Texas, and he wore big Texas boots and a white scarf, and he had a chic wife with a poodle that was in his office half the time. So that's, you know, Air Force atmosphere. So when we left there, he said, I'm gonna give you guys probably the only choice you'll ever have in your life in the military. He said you can go to Walla Walla, Washington, or another one in Arizona that I can't spit the name out, or Avon Park in Florida. And it was so cold up there, I said, no problem, I'll go to Florida. So we went down to Florida, and somebody asked him about Avon Park, Florida, and he said, well, it sits way down there by the Everglades, and he said, right now you can recognize it because there'd be a B-26 burning at each end of the runway. It'd been a B-26 training base, so it was, so we went down there, and then our crew, we collected our crew down there.
When you say collected, were they chosen by you or assigned to you?
No, they were assigned. Yeah, they were all assigned, and
and a B-17 crew typically has 10 people, including you. Is that correct?
yes.
Okay. And I guess my question is, obviously your main duty is to fly the airplane, but you're also the leader of that crew, and I assume you felt responsibility for, I mean, all those men's lives in some ways are dependent upon you. Can you talk a little bit about that, or how you felt about that?
Well, I think we recognized our responsibility, to meld a crew together and make sure that they know who you were, and instill, that this is a business we're getting into. This is not a joyride, and we're going to combat, and our lives are, and many others too, are dependent on it. So we had to, create an attitude with everybody, and at the same time, learn to relax in the process of all of it, so you have some fun too. Yeah, we had a good crew. We had one problem with the crew. The co-pilot, had a negative attitude. He was not happy, and that, in a way, is understandable because everybody'd rather be the pilot, have their own crew, their own airplane, and when the co-pilot got his wings and got his commission, then from then on it's sort of the luck of the draw. You could be assigned anywhere, wherever they want to assign you. That's it. There's no argument. You can't make a plea and say, "Oh, I don't want to do this. I want to do that." That's totally out of the picture. So those that were made co-pilots weren't happy people. It was sort of a letdown to him. So he came with that attitude. He was a big, handsome guy, and so we eventually got that straightened out.
How'd you do that?
Because the co-pilot had never been in a B-17, so we had to teach him to fly it. That was one of the other assignments we had.
So you actually had to teach your own co-pilot how to fly a B-17.
Yeah.
Huh?
Yeah. Yeah.
So you depart for Europe. Did you go by ship? Did you fly? How did you go over there?
No, we went by plane. We had our training was cut short by 2 weeks, and we didn't know for sure where we were going. Well, we knew we were going to combat, but anyway, they put us on a train, and we stopped in Hunter Field in Georgia, and processed a lot of papers, our wills, and so on. And then we found out we were going by boat, and we got on the. From there we went to. Jen, what's the base in New Jersey? The air base.
I'm sorry.
What's the air base in New Jersey?
Lakehurst?
No, not that one. The other one we talked about.
Newark?
Hmm?
Newark?
Barry?
Newark?
Are you talking about Fort Dix?
Yeah, the old bases up there.
Okay.
That-
Fort Dix and Earl?
Fort Dix, yeah. Yeah, we went to Dix. Then we got up about 5 o'clock in the morning. We got on a train, and we ended up going on a Queen and on the QE1. And I think we were I know we were one of the last that got on, because it embarked 4 or 5 hours after we got on. We got on in the middle of the night, and sometime the next day it embarked. So, and yet it was raining. It was a miserable, dark night, and you walk up the metal steps, and you think you're getting on A deck, and we end up getting on F deck. And they didn't use elevators. The elevators were not for use, and so it was. But they had bands out there, already banned anyway, and so the people were there, in spirit.
But during when you're crossing the ocean on the ship, is anything going on in terms of additional training, or is it basically just going?
No, the British, we had assemblies, another word for it, where everybody had to be out on deck, and there was a certain procedure for you to get there, and a place for you to be, wherever you were sleeping and so on. You had to go one way, and the British were very strict. Of course, you had to have a life jacket on, and I think we ate at 10 in the morning and 8 at night. That was my meal assignments over there. And they had a lot of Hershey bars. You could always buy Hershey bars. They had a lot of Hershey bars for sale. I always said it was a floating crap game going across there. There were more ways to lose your money if you wanted to, but I've been on those ships since the war, and I think back, and they had all the swimming pools and the libraries and everything were just stacked with men. 20,000 men on there. We slept. Well, 4 of us slept in a closet, and this is officers' quarters, and you would have had to get out one at a time, because there were 2 bunks on either side, and there's about that much room in the middle. So we were fortunate.
Now, once you were in England, where were you based?
Well, when you went to England, they all went up Granite Harbor in Scotland. That's where you get off. And I have records of there were 102 bomber crews got on that boat, and 15 of them went to the 95th, and 15 of them went to the 390th, and 15 went to the 100th. And those three groups formed the 13th Air Wing, and they were all located very close together. So I ended up in the 95th, with 15 other crews, which I knew a few of them, not too many of them. But one of them was a real close friend that I lost. So in Horham, the 100th group was based 5 miles from the 95th. And on the other side, the 390th was 7 or 8 miles. And so it's like, like having a base here at the airport, and then where we live, having another base, like 5 miles away. And then the other direction would be like Charlottesville, having another one down there.
How did you find life in England off the base? I guess I'm talking about now. Did the English welcome you? What was it like?
English were just magnificent people. We tore up their land and built their bases and so on, but they were no problem with the English people. They had their welcome mat out, their arms wide open, without exception, really.
What kind of things did you do for recreation off the base?
We didn't really do a lot because we were, we couldn't go anywhere because we might be assigned to fly the next day. So I played a lot of table tennis over there. I think that was my main recreation. I loved to play table tennis, and they had it in the officers' quarters. So they had all these guys with fancy serves, so it took about a month till you got by that, then you could beat them. No, we went, we went on like 3-day leaves every so often, and we would go to London. We could get on the train at DISS, D-I-S-S, train stop, and go down to London and spend a couple nights down there. And that was our, that's what we did on leave, really. And,
what was London like during the war?
Down in London?
Yeah, in London.
London was indescribable. For literally millions of men and women, in a concentrated area with no lights at night. Just indescribable, really. Place is alive. People of all nationalities. Not good food, but we had the money. We had all the money. We didn't know what to do with anyway. And a pound was worth $4 over there. And when I was over there, so we stayed at the best hotels. The first trip I ever made down there, 3 or 4 of us, I forget which, I think there were 3, and we talked a cabbie into giving us a tour all day long, and we paid him enough money that he would do it, and so we got it. The first thing we did down there, we took a day's tour. We saw all the bombing damage, and we got a bird's eye view of everything. It was fascinating.
Were you ever there when a buzz bomb came over or it was attacked?
I was that, yeah, a number of times. And we were staying at the Savoy Hotel, and we had checked into a room. I forget who I was with, but we were not in the hotel, and one of those buzz bombs hit the hotel. And killed a captain in the next room that we had. And it blew out the windows, and my co-pilot was there and got cut in the face with glass from it. So, yeah, when we hear those things, everybody was running underground, the English, and we were trying to find and see what it looked like. No, not much sense in that, but yeah, I've seen them visually. You know, I haven't seen half a dozen of them, but I've seen a couple of them. Yeah.
So when you got to your base and you were assigned to your living quarters, talk to me a little bit about that, please.
Oh, they were all Quonset huts, and they had a GI stove in the middle of it, and if you got 5 feet away from it, you froze, and if you got any closer than 5 feet, then you got burned. And we used coal over there. They'd ration coal, and every so often we'd have to send somebody to slip up and see if they could get some more coal, and without getting caught. Yeah. Well, it's close quarters. I think we had 8 in there. I think we had 2 crews. So there wasn't, again, the military was not a private place. No place you can run and hide and shed a tear or anything like that. Had to do it in the open.
I believe you indicated that you were assigned the sleeping quarters of a crew that did not come back. Is that right?
We were exactly that. Yeah, we got. There were some sheets over there. We inherited the sheets of the crew that went down. Yeah, the first, my introduction over there was not too good because we were assigned to make an orientation flight, and we had, I think, 2 engines started, and the tower came on and issued an edict to shut all engines off. The field is immediately closed. And about that time, we looked up in full vision and parts of planes and bodies coming down, and 2 planes had collided up there somewhere. And so that was the first day of flight we didn't make. So yeah, so we did an orientation flight because everything looks alike over there. I think they had like 90, forget the exact number, like 90 bomber bases, let alone more fighter bases and so on. So everything was close together, and the terrain all looks alike, so it's hard to get orientated. We were about 15 miles from the North Sea, and so the only way you could find your field was with a radio beacon, and that's how we found our field when we come back. A radio beacon. We had there was no other navigation, nothing. So if in takeoffs, if you took off at night on a long mission, you took off at night, at a black of night, and so it's purely an instrument takeoff. Pilots take off purely by instrument, and then when you get off, you start making a small turn, and eventually you're circling up the rendezvous at 17,000 feet. So you've got hundreds and hundreds of planes are all doing the same thing, going up in the black of night. And that's my friend Cher. Cher. Is that Cher? Is Cher there?
Yes.
We're taking a quick
I
break.
shushed her up.
All right, we're coming back from a short break talking to Mr. Bertram. And Mr. Bertram, while we're on break, you were talking about training for combat and how really there isn't any. Can you tell us more about that?
Well, the most important part about training for combat was getting the crew together and knowing you were all on the same direction, the same discipline and so on. But for training, there is no such thing as combat training. That's a myth. You get your combat training the first day you go to combat and not before that. And we did a little formation flying down there, which served a purpose. We did some bombing, which in some ways was comical. We bombed at night, and then they had photographic pictures and so on. And I know we would go up there and they say, well, you're gonna bomb at this direction, and nobody coming the other way, and we'd be lined up to go into bomb and be somebody coming the other way. And we come back down and have a lot of bombs, and the guy said, what are you guys doing up there, And one day we came down and we were last in. They turned the lights out on the field. Field was perfectly dark. And Florida at night is very, very dark. There's no such thing as horizons down there in Florida. So we flew around a while. We couldn't alert anybody, and about ready to go somewhere else and find another field. And a navigator got hold of somebody on the radio, and they finally turned the lights back down and let us in. But we did aerial gunnery, and the gunners had all been through school, their aerial gunnery, but they would have a pilot towing a target, it's just a big stream of cloth, I guess, or something, and they would shoot at that. And I would think, they could assign me to that job. Now here I am flying a B-17, so that was how things went. So, but I don't think anybody, I can't visualize anybody ever being afraid that we were going to combat. We didn't talk about that. And when you got over there, they took you up to do some formation flying to see how good you could really fly formation, and then one day, the next day you were assigned to flight. That night, you found out you were going on your first mission the next day, and I don't remember anybody shaking in their shoes, and being scared to death. Quietly, they probably were, but and the normal process over there was to have a pilot fly co-pilot on his first mission with another crew, so that he would have that experience. When he took his crew, he would already have an experience on one mission. For some reason, I didn't do that. The first mission I flew with my own crew, and every mission thereafter, so we all did it together the first time. And it was, pretty thrilling to get back down to the ground and know that you flew your first mission. So, but I had a great crew. I had, there were a lot of problems with crews over there. Sometimes the pilot would, have problems and go to pieces, not being able to fly, and sometimes crew members couldn't stomach it. They get sick and so on. We flew 36 missions, and everybody flew every mission. That's pretty remarkable. Yeah.
So you flew 36 combat missions once you were over in England.
I did that, right.
Okay. And at that time, was there a set number of missions that you had to do in order to rotate back home?
Well, when I went over there, it was 30. And when I got about 10 or 15 missions, they moved it to 35. So we got to stay a little bit longer. Yeah. Well, initially it was 25. And it was 25 in 1943. And they were the most difficult times over there. People who survived that did well. We were lucky ourselves to survive, but so what happened? I got there in April, and the weather was starting to break because weather is a huge factor in Europe, and there were a lot of missions recalled because of weather. You know, they're all up there, and you know, targets are obscured and so on, so they finally gave up and come back home. So when I got there, the weather was starting to break, and Arnold, the chief of staff in the Air Force, changed commanders in the 8th Air Force. He was upset because we weren't flying enough missions, we weren't flying deep enough, and history will bear that out. And the fellow was a good friend of Arnold's, but anyway, he took him out, and he put in Doolittle as commander. So we started to fly longer missions, and they started to fly more often. So, you know, I went through 36 missions, you know, fairly rapidly, considering the weather and everything.
Did you ever see General Doolittle?
I never saw Doolittle, no. No. They had a big to-do over there about 2 weeks after I left. They had a 200 mission anniversary, and they had the band leader that got killed over there.
Glenn Miller?
Hmm?
Glenn Miller?
Yeah, Glenn Miller was there, and I don't know whether there's any pictures of that book. Maybe pictures in that book in there, but so I missed that anyway.
My understanding is that when General Doolittle was put in command of the 8th, that he changed the policy about fighter escort, that he told the fighters they did not have to just stick with the bombers, that they could go out aggressively looking to fight the Luftwaffe fighters.
That's true, yeah.
Was that as a bomber pilot, did you feel good about that, or did you feel like you were losing some of your protection?
No, I had no feelings on it. I mean, our feeling was to end the war, you know, whatever we could do to end the war. And if they were going after their fighters, that was fine with us, unless we saw those things are better. So we had no objection to that. And one thing about flying a bomber is that when you get over the target, you're all alone. You don't have any escort. You don't have any German fighters bothering you either, because you're just flying into a sky full of shrapnel. So I always kid my fighter pilot friends, you know, you guys, you really never got into the war. So.
Were the bombers able to communicate with the fighter escort?
They were, yeah. Not individually, but you know, from a lead standpoint, right? Yeah, they had communication.
So I've always wondered, for example, sometimes I knew a bomber had to drop out of formation because of mechanical difficulty or whatever. And when that happened, of course, as a straggler, you're vulnerable to the German fighters. Would they typically assign one of our fighters to escort that bomber, or were they on their own?
No, that might have happened, but there was no policy there or anything. I would have loved to have one on the way back a couple times, but they did their thing, and then they had to go home too. They did a magnificent job. And the records will show it. They tore up the German Air Force pretty bad. So that's all we needed.
You had close encounters with German fighters, though, I would guess.
I did. We got, we didn't get hit with fighters on every mission, but anytime you went to Berlin, you knew you were going to get hit by fighters, because I don't think Hitler was too happy about bombing Berlin. And the 95th is famous because they were the first group that bombed Berlin, and the weather was nasty, and that was a few weeks before I got over there. And I think the mission was recalled, but the 95th went through, and bombed. So that's a strong mark for the 95th, and they were well recognized for it. But I bombed Berlin, I think, on my fourth mission, and we, when we got called to go to Berlin, you sort of clenched your teeth because that's 10 hours take off to landing, and that's a long mission.
To a well-defended target, too. So,
Pardon me?
to a well-defended target as well. That's what I'd like to do, if you could. Your first mission to Berlin, can you take us through sort of the whole mission in terms of the briefing and then what you would do before flight and then the actual forming up? Can you sort of take us through that?
Yeah, but they would have a duty sergeant come around and actually wake you out of your bed like 3:30, for an early mission, and then from there you get something to eat, whatever you wanted, and then you'd go to a briefing room, the officers' briefing room, and they would pull the curtain and have a map on there to show you where we're going. So when it was Berlin, there was, lots of different expressions about here, we're going to Berlin. And they would tell you, they would give you a briefing sheet, which I have some copies of, what altitude, when you were taking off, what altitude, and all the points and the timing points of the whole mission, from beginning, takeoff to landing, they're all in one sheet. And all the codes, the altitudes, there was a code for everything. And that's the only time you use the radio was, with codes. But so then we would pick up our gear, our parachutes, and get our gear, whatever we're going to wear, and go out to the plane. In trucks, they'd take you out in trucks, and you would check over the plane. Everybody do their duty for whatever site, and then when we got signal from the tower to start our engines, and we would start our engines and check out the magnetos and everything. And after we got them all checked out and getting ready for takeoff, the truck would come around and it would top the engines. All the engines are running, and they would top the engines. So you needed all that gas, all that fuel. And then you were briefed on what plane to follow, on the taxi strips. The planes were on hard stands, concrete hard stands. Because if you got off the concrete and got in the mud, you'd have to get it towed out. It's very muddy over there. So you had these hard stands, and you had the 412th and a bunch of them here, and then the 335th and the 336th squadrons. And so you would follow somebody out on the, be black and night, and then they would see a flare for a first takeoff, and so they take off, and then 30 seconds later, you get the order to go. So you're lined up, and the plane in front of you is not off the runway whenever you go. So, it's pretty nerve-wracking. Plus the fact that it's pitch dark, so you're not taking off by looking at the sides and so on. You're looking at your instruments. You're taking off strictly on instruments. And so when you take off, then we had to make a small turn to the left because of trees and so on. And the plane ahead of you, all the planes fired a very pistol from the tail with a color code, so you knew the plane in front of you, and they would do that on takeoff and so on. And then you would circle up, at night, and many times it was cloudy, as soon as you got off the ground. So it would take you an hour and a half to get to 17,000 feet. You were flying at 200 feet a minute, and today a jet in a minute will get you to 10,000 probably. But we were loaded with ammunition, bombs, fuel, and that's as fast as we get up, 200 feet a minute. So it was 5 minutes for 1,000. We were going up to 17,000. And when we get up there, it would be daylight, and then we had coordinates and so on to find our formation. We had different checkpoints, and we find our formation, and you by a certain time it was all formed, and then the groups would form, and then the wings would form, with the 100th and the 390th and the 95th. So those wings were, by the time we got across the channel, those wings were all in place. And away you went. So then you still would not be at your bombing altitude. You would be flying, as a wing, and eventually getting up to your bombing altitude, which is usually 26, 27,000 feet, 25, 26. And you would, as you went across Europe, you would get up to that altitude, and
the way you describe it, it seems amazing to me that many planes could do that, especially when you're taking off at night, and especially in the conditions you're talking about. Seems amazing to me.
Yeah, they were tense times, but they were business times. You didn't. You certainly didn't want to show any lack of confidence or any fear as a pilot. So I never experienced that issue. There were situations where pilots, like any other human being, just finally cracked up, and had to give up the crew and so on. But fortunately, I didn't have that experience. But I know when we got down, we were all glad to be back on the ground, and tired and relieved, and
Those pilots that you mentioned that cracked up eventually, how did that usually manifest itself? Did they just refuse to go, or how did that really usually show itself?
I think it was recognizable. There would be some experience that led up to the situation, and that wasn't, it wasn't something that happened every week, but it did happen a number of times. And there were co-pilots that got elevated as a result of that too.
Right. So, were you ever scared when you were flying?
I guess it'd be human nature. You had to be scared. Yeah, sure. You were going over the target was, you were being shot at. So it's like anybody in combat is shot at you, scare the hell out of you. But and you just. I'm only here because I was lucky. I was fortunate because you can take shrapnel. One piece of shrapnel in the right place can take a plane down. I had planes full of shrapnel, and never took me down. Well, one of them took me down, but I got back. But and we had one man seriously wounded, and he survived. So. Based on other people's experiences and looking out and seeing a plane go down in a spin, like, count our blessings. Yeah, it's not. If somebody survived, like I was fortunate enough to do, it didn't have much to do with your flying skills. If you got into situations. Certain situations where you're damaged and so on, then flying skills and your ability to control the situation come into hand. But other than that, the flying skill has nothing to do with this guy going down and this guy being able to fly through and come back. Just lucky you didn't get hit in the right place, or in the wrong place, as it were. Yeah.
When you, let's say you're over Berlin on this mission we're talking about, and it's time to drop your bombs, do you drop off the lead plane's bombardier, or does your own bombardier make that decision?
They drop off a lead, yeah.
But does every plane still have the bomb sight, the Norden bomb sight in it?
He did, yeah. And he uses that, but he's still dropping. Where the lead's dropping, that area. So,
I've wanted to ask you this: the story you would hear about the Norden bomb sight, and I guess the claim that they could hit a pickle barrel from 10,000 feet. Is that true or a bit exaggerated?
No, that's probably highly exaggerated. I mean, we did so much concentration bombing that it wasn't like we were, looking for a pickle barrel. I mean, we were going in there in waves and mass bombing. We were annihilating cities. It was sad, but that's what we were doing.
If you had to abort a mission before you landed, did you dispose of your ordnance, your bombs?
In some cases we did, some cases we didn't. We had one mission which we didn't get credit for. We got credit for a couple hours flying time, where we went up to 17,000 feet and the weather was bad. I mean, you couldn't possibly get information, and then they took us to 19 and it was bad. And they took us to 21. This is the only time it's ever happened. And the weather was, you still couldn't. There was too much clouds and everything. So then they aborted the mission. So now everybody has to get back down through all that soup that we just came up through. And you got all these hundreds of planes. And so, yeah, we went back, we took our bombs with us and landed with them. Took our fuel with us, everything. So, down, found our field and got on the ground. And then we got like 2.5 hours flying time. That was it. Yeah, they were, in fact, on that mission, the co-pilot saved our life. Right? When we got to 21,000, up there looking around, and the co-pilot grabbed the control of the plane and flipped it over, just flipped it clear down, setting, on the wingtip. And another B-17 came, zooming by, and then the bombardier in the nose said it was close enough he could have reached out and touched it. So that was very, very frightening. So we got control of the plane, 1,000 or 1,500 feet, got it under control. And the mission was aborted then, so we all went back home. So we had combat experience there without getting a mission.
I guess in general, what was worse, the flak or the German fighters?
Flak. Yeah, German fighters were deadly, but when you went over these big cities, somebody had already been in there, and you probably were not in the lead group. And so the sky is black. I mean, literally black. Like you got a thunderhead out here coming, and so you're next in. You fly, and it's black because it's all shrapnel. They're throwing up these 88 millimeter shells, about that long, and they're not shooting at a plane. They're boxing them. They're just covering the whole sky. So when you go in there, it's frightening, really. And I don't think I ever bombed a large city that I didn't pick up shrapnel holes in the plane. Pretty hard to get through that stuff without getting hit. And the fighters were, quick and dirty and deadly, but they were here and gone. And the shrapnel, you were flying through a whole mess of it in there. But, we had a claim on a fighter, but we never got credit for it. Our gunners made a claim on it, but there were a lot of gunners that made a claim on the same plane.
Did you encounter any German jets?
We did, yeah. We encountered Ju-88s, and we had an experience that I don't think anybody ever had, and I really can't tell you where we were, but we were deep into Germany and bombing some city, and we got acid on the plane, and that was an early flight because I was flying a camouflage plane. When we first went over there, the planes were camouflage painted. That was the F model before they had the chin turrets and so on. Then later on, they knew that wasn't helping anything, so they stopped painting them. But anyway, we were flying a camouflage plane, and the acid took a mess of paint off of it, and it deeply etched the plexiglass nose, and it deeply etched the windshield on the plane. And we never really found out anything about that other than it was pretty scary. I kept asking, but we never got any research information on it or anything. But I'd like to have pictures of that.
This was acid that you encountered during the flight, you mean, or something that had
No, it came from fighters, from some
Oh.
type of fighters. Yeah, there were fighters in the area, and all we saw was, just a wisp of stuff. We didn't, it hit us we didn't even know it hardly. So,
You saw something though that you flew into that you think had the acid in it.
yeah, apparently, and my friend who did the artwork in this, who was a British pilot, did some research on it and found out that in one of the jet engines that they had, that they were it was a rocket engine that they were using, stuff like this. So, like there's an article in there that he got on that. So that was an experience that nobody else ever had. But we got back safe. And everybody looking at the plane wondering what in the hell has happened to this thing.
You got there before D-Day, correct? And I saw from the records that your group flew some tactical missions both before D-Day and after D-Day. How did they differ from the other types of missions where you're bombing cities? Was there a different altitude, or were there any differences?
Well, we actually flew 2 missions on D-Day itself. I think our group flew 3 missions. I flew in the first and the last, and we flew that at 10,000 feet. So that was a tactical mission. I don't recall flying any other tactical missions at 10,000 feet. Perhaps we did, but I don't recall what we did. No, we bombed Cherbourg and places like that are, right on the coast and so on. And we did that before D-Day. Yeah.
But I'm curious, on your mission on D-Day, did you see the ships, the invasion fleet? Or
Second mission we did, yes.
what did that
We got
look
a
like?
bird's eye view of it. It's just,
Describe it for us.
well, it's breathtaking. And thanking, the good Lord that you're up in the air and not down there on the water. Yeah. Yeah, I was proud to be a part of D-Day, and not sure how much I contributed, but was proud to be there.
I know that, again, from what you've said, that you had a mission where your plane was badly damaged. I believe it was over Munich, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Tell us about that mission and what happened and what you had to do with the damaged plane.
Well, we were over the target and had dropped their bombs, and we got hit, just near direct hit around the bomb bay, and everything just exploded and knocked us out of formation. So it was pretty powerful, and we didn't, I didn't know what happened. Everything happened at once, and didn't really know what happened. We lost power, and we were going down, and we finally started piecing information together, and we have a man badly wounded in the waist, and the other waist gunner and the ball turret gunner were taking care of him, and then we found out that we lost oxygen, so we had to go down. Can't survive without oxygen. You can't survive more than 30 seconds at 27,000 feet without oxygen, and then we lost one engine went out, so we got that feathered, and we had to do this, while we're going down, and we're just outside of Munich, which is almost inside of Switzerland, and we were briefed on Switzerland that if we were in a dire situation and could not get back, that you could land. If you could make it, you could land in Switzerland, be interned there. So, I basically had a few minutes, to decide, what we're going to do. But when we got down lower, I started to get some power back, and I found out that in addition to losing an engine, we lost all 4 turbos. And you can't fly a B-17 at altitude without turbos, so we lost a lot of power. And as we got down lower, we didn't need as much power. And so when we were down about 5,000 feet, I finally decided, we would try to get back home. And so we headed home all by ourselves. And that's pretty scary, really. I'd say that was a frightening situation, that you could be in, that I was in, as far as I experienced, because that was a long way home by ourselves, over all occupied territory, every bit of it. So we headed home, and the navigator kept us away from, big cities and so on. And we got home. We were shot to pieces. The plane was, ripped. In the bomb bay, had big braces ripped in half. And so it's another situation where, I could have easily got hit with like that, where the plane would just explode. You're going, but they gave me a chance. So we were kissed the ground when we got back from that one. So they had reported us down, and in fact, I've got a book, a fellow that wrote that was on that mission, that was a waist gunner, and said, Bertram's planes got hit, and he's going down. I said, and he said, I think he's going all the way. He's got that in his book. So that was exciting. Very, very exciting. I think, the years go by, and we never even talk about these things for years and years. So you guys are stirring this all up again. Yeah.
Well, we really appreciate you talking to us about this. I know it's not always easy, but it's important to
well, I've had all my family go to these reunions. They've all gone to England, and it's really quite an experience for them, more so than talking to me. When you get into that, when you get over there to Horham and at the base, and then the picture is fully painted. Because they still have the main runway saved. It's all broken up, bits of concrete and so on, but it's all farmland, so they saved it. So I walked back end to end with my family. Touching. Yeah. But a B-17, pretty stable airplane. There's all kinds of stories and pictures where they're about torn in half and they make it back. And we had some pretty big holes in the plane when we brought back.
Were they able to repair the plane, or did they have to scrap it?
No, they repaired it, yeah. They're pretty good at patching them up. Yeah.
By the time you got hit by that flak, you had dropped your bombs, is that correct?
Yeah.
If you had still had your bombs, was there a risk that the plane would have?
I would think so. When you get hit in a bomb bay, yeah, I would think so.
And you said your waist gunner survived?
He did. He had surgery at they had a base there, which served the 13th Air Wing. They had a base on the far end of our bomb group base. There was a hospital there, and he had surgery there, and then he went home and had surgery again, and it's fine. Yeah. He just got hit up in the shoulder. And he, if somebody wasn't there to take care of him, he would have bled to death. But
And what was the procedure if you had somebody seriously wounded on your plane when you were coming into land? Did you?
it fired a red flare. Yeah, when we came back, we came back late, and they thought we were down. So, yeah.
I've heard you mention before that when the planes were returning from a mission, of course, there were a lot of people on the airfield watching and counting the planes and seeing how many were making it back. Were you ever in that position on a mission that you didn't fly, where you were watching them come in?
Oh, sure. We were always out there when they came back. Yeah, counting them in. And that was common. I mean, they were part of us, so yeah, that happened. That was emotional, when you come in and you got 2 or 3 of them not there, missing. So.
And you mentioned before that you had lost someone that was a good friend of yours, I guess around the second mission. And I only raise it just to ask how'd you cope with that kind of loss and still go on and do your duty?
Well, you just swallow it, and keep on going, because we were pretty busy flying missions, so you just, a couple of days later, you're on another mission, and that friendship sort of passes by. So you didn't make. We made friends in cadets and so on, but after that, really never made friends. I didn't make any friends in combat. I don't know anybody that did. I think if you were permanently stationed, part of the cadre over there, then you lived another life, and you got to know people in the area, families, and so on. I didn't. I found an email where I had written my parents and said that I had been playing tennis at a family's home, and some things you remember, some things you don't, and I just don't remember that. It really happened because I wrote them in a letter, but I don't remember. So.
When you say that you didn't really make friends after you got into combat, was that to try to protect yourself from losing them?
I think in part, and it was just a combat atmosphere, and the crews were separated in as much as, this crew flew here, this flew here, and there was no really interplay with them, and I played a lot of table tennis, and I actually met a lot of guys over there. I couldn't tell you the first name. I don't remember that. So.
I'd like to talk about another mission, the one that you flew in support of the French resistance, which was part of the reason you were awarded the Legion of Honor by the French government, which was an incredible honor to you.
Well, that was a fascinating mission because it was so different, and we didn't fly through any shrapnel. But this was, they considered it a secret mission. You couldn't talk about it. You couldn't tell anybody that there was anything different or not. So we went to a briefing, and the briefing was not on our mission, it was on another mission. So we had our own separate briefing, and I'm not clear in my mind how that happened, but we went up with a mass of planes, and then they had a mission they were going on, and we went up with them, and when we got to a certain point, then, we diverted 12 of us and headed for the French Alps. And so we had two 12-foot cylinders in our plane when they had parachutes attached. Huge things, and they were full of small arms for the French resistance. And so whenever we got down near where they were, they lit bonfires so we could find them. And they lit bonfires on a signal from the British Broadcasting, BBC. So, we went down and we were dropping these things from like 500 feet, which is right on the ground. And that part was sort of thrilling, to be over enemy territory at 500 feet. You could be picked off by most anything, ground fire. But so we went down and we spotted the bonfires. It was in the foothills of the Alps, and we could see the French resistance men down there. It was fun. It was not fun. It was exciting and it was thrilling. To see these guys down there. And so then we went around and we dropped these cylinders. And the cylinder on my right side, or on my left side really, the pilot side, hung up. This parachute hung up on some part of the bomb bay doors. Bomb bay doors are, pretty big. So now we've got this like 1,000-pound plus pendulum, swinging from the bottom of the plane. And after it was all over, it gave me due respect for parachutes because those things hung on like crazy because I kept swaying the plane trying to, and I was scared to damage the thing, could hit a prop, tear out an engine, do a lot of things. And so in the meantime, I'm flying around trying to get this thing to drop, and the rest of the planes are going. They're headed for home because they don't know what's going on with me. And so finally it dropped, ripped off and dropped. And so, we hit the bomb bay switch and nothing happened. The bomb bay doors wouldn't close. And so the engineer gunner went back, and then the co-pilot went back, and they wouldn't close manually either. It had bent a big drive rod on the thing. So, now we're hours away from home, and the bomb bay doors won't close. So we had to come back alone, and we couldn't catch up with those guys because the bomb bay doors are open, and there's a lot of resistance, lose speed. So we got back. We went all the way. That was two times we came back all alone. I think this one was the first one. I have to look at my records, but so that was pretty thrilling. And we had to come back and land with the bomb bay doors open. Took about that much clearance on the ground. So that was a thrill for the crew. The pilot's got it made because he's got his hands full. He's busy every second, and trying to work things out, and everything's under control. The crew in the back are sitting back there, wondering what in the name of God is going to happen to us now. Are we going to be able to get back or what? And the same as the other, even worse than the other one where we were hit. I mean, those guys are back there by themselves. I never traded places with them. The pilot had the easiest job.
The two missions that you flew back alone, and obviously you're concerned about enemy fighters and other things.
Yeah,
Did
really,
you-
really concerned about fighters.
I'm sorry?
Really concerned about fighters. Fighters just pick us off.
Was there a particular altitude that you flew back in when you were flying back alone?
Well, that was, I just flew back around 5,000, I didn't have the power to fly higher, so I didn't have much choice. I had to fly back at low altitude. And, because you've got elevations you have to, that the navigator comes in handy when he gets that sort of thing. He tell you how high the terrain is and so on. Yeah. My navigator was, I don't think he'd ever shaved in his life. He was a great guy, young guy.
I read somewhere that you described before takeoff that you would say a prayer.
Yeah, we did.
Well, can you how'd that prayer go? What?
Prayer was very simple, but, just pray to be taken care of and give us safety. A few short words.
Was that something you did privately or over the intercom, or?
No, we did that, as a group. We got together on the ground before we got in the plane, yeah.
And did you do that pretty much before every mission?
Pardon me?
Did you do that before every mission?
Yeah, we did. Yeah, I don't think we ever missed that. Because once you're in a plane, the four officers flip themselves up to get in the front of the plane, and the crew gets in the back. And so when you go visit these planes now and see, I don't see anybody chinning themselves and throwing themselves up in the plane that way. I'm not sure how we did it, other than we were 20, 21, 22 years old.
When you went on a mission, were there any religious services before the missions, or were those just on Sunday?
Oh, no, very definitely. They had religious service available for everybody. I did not go to those, but
I'm sorry, those were before each mission. They would have those services.
yeah, they were available, at all times. But certainly they were available before each mission. Yeah. I don't remember in the briefing. I can't tell you whether the chaplain came in or not. He probably did, but I don't remember. Yeah. We were too wrapped up in where we were going.
Any other combat missions or combat mission experiences that you'd like to talk about?
Do I have any missions?
Any others you'd like to mention and talk about?
Well, the mission that I don't like to talk about is when we went to Leipzig, and I'm sort of put the blame on the lead plane. The pilot. I always said I think he was going after a medal, some special medal, because we made 3 runs over the target. And each time we went, the sky was black. So, and by the time we made the third run, the formation was disheveled because you can't, if you try to make too tight a turn with a formation like that, it's like being out in a playground and you're the last one going around the circle. And so I was on the inside and I was sure we were going to stall. And so that was the only mission I ever flew that I was not happy with the leadership. Other thing, I didn't think it was necessary at all. And target, they had this problem where the target's obscured with clouds and so on, and they always have an alternate target. So I felt that we should have been on the alternate target, not 3 times around. And that mission, we brought back more holes on the plane than any mission we flew, and still didn't lose an engine, didn't get anybody wounded. Miraculous, totally miraculous, to have that happen and not go down. That plane had well over 200 holes in it. So I wasn't a happy camper. And I wrote that up on my briefing, so I don't know whether you read that or not.
You talked about weather being a problem over targets in Europe. Before the bombers actually got there, did they send anybody to do last-minute weather reconnaissance ahead of you guys? Or?
Yeah, they had a reconnaissance. In fact, I flew that reconnaissance once where you go out and chart the weather and so on.
Are you alone when you do that?
Yeah, we were alone. Yeah, they did, they used all the tools they have, but, and they weren't all that great, in the 40s. And, the same with instrument flying and so on, or communication, all we had was a radio beacon, or nothing fancy. So, yeah, I think they did it, but the weather is pretty sticky over there, and we flew one formation where we were on our way, and we hit a vicious area of turbulence. I mean, really turbulence, and it scattered our plane, our group. We got like 26 planes or so in a group. It just scattered them like pigeons, and fortunately, nobody hit each other. So we lost a lot of time. It took a long time to get that group back together again. But I mean, they're just flying along, and everything's normal, and all of a sudden you hit this scattered them. Vicious, very vicious. So a lot of little things like that happen.
Did you have any other experiences during your combat missions that you'd like to share?
No, I don't know. I think I can't think of any other unique situations. I mean, we flew some missions where we didn't have a fighter. We weren't hit by fighters, and we flew missions where we could see fighters and we didn't get hit. So that sort of thing.
When you did encounter fighters, I'm curious, what was the German strategy for attacking the formations?
Well, because they like to come from 12 o'clock high, and straight down on your nose. But, and they also come in from the side, whip in, and, go right through, laterally through the formations and so on. So, I don't know what they like to do most. You know, they had situations where they come in underneath and they flip their plane, and I don't know their tactics. The less I saw them, the better.
When you did encounter fighters, was there a lot of communication amongst your crew to pinpoint where they were coming from?
Yeah, you get was a lot of conversation when they went through. Didn't take long for them, but yeah, you knew when they were in the area because everybody was exclaiming, you know, that fighters here. I see this fighter and so on. We kept a pretty tight control on communication. I mean, I've seen some movies and things, and it's just, you know, it's all types of conversation on the intercom and so on. That's not realistic.
You said you didn't have direct conversation with your fighter escort, but who could you talk to in your formation? Any of the planes?
No, we didn't really talk to anybody. You know, if we had a situation, we could talk. You know, we could talk to the lead plane if we had to, and you know, if we had to abort, I had to abort on one mission, so you know, you have to communicate with them and tell them that you're leaving. I lost an engine on just as we hit the coast on the way in, and it was a long mission, so I got permission to abort, and I came back home. And if you abort, you have to report in a handwritten, to the commanding officer why you aborted. They were pretty tight on that. So
You could talk to the lead plane. Could the other planes hear you talking to the lead plane, or was it just with the lead plane?
no, we didn't talk back and forth in the planes. No, they didn't do that. You know, things are too busy for that.
When was what date was your last mission?
Well, I flew, I'd have to check, but I think it was early September. On my next to last mission, when we came in, and I was flying, I came in a little high, and so I decided instead of going around, I'll set it down, you know, so I set it down, and I used up every inch of the runway to get stopped and so on. So I think the powers to be, you know, up in the tower said, I think we better give Bertram a rest, you know. So I got right after that, you know, like the next day, I got orders to take a 2-week R&R up in Blackpool, which is up in the West Coast. So we weren't too happy about that. We had one mission to go, and then they sent us away for 2 weeks. So I think that was like mid-August, and I think I flew my last mission in September, early September.
Of 1944.
Yeah.
Right.
And we had exciting things happen after that because we got orders to come back by boat. Went to Krennic Harbor, and the Queen Mary was sitting in the harbor, and they put us on a skiff and took us out, and we lived in the Queen Mary for 5 or 6 days, and we didn't know what was going on. And finally, and there wasn't that many on board. There were some casualties from the ground troops, and a few crews, B-17 crews, and you know, comparatively, the thing was fairly empty. And Churchill came on board. So we went back with Churchill and his whole, I mean, I don't know who was taking care of the war because he had all his crew on there. I've got the names of them. He had, you know, head of the Air Force, head of the ground, head of the fleet, and he had his wife. What's his wife's name?
Winnie?
No, not
Minnie?
Winnie.
Something.
Short term was. Anyway, his wife was on there. We didn't, but in the officers, and on that trip coming back, in fact, from the first day we were on there, we had our choice of entrees, and where we ate and so on. It was first class, and they had an officers movie. We'd get down there, and his staff would come in there. They had rifles, all the way up to their arms, their shoulders. So we got to see a lot of those guys. And we dropped Churchill off. Well, we finally got started, and when we came over on the QE-1, we had no escort. They were the fastest ships on the water at that time. And but on the way back with Churchill, we had escort in the air and everywhere we looked, and I'm sure we had it under the water. And we dropped him off at Halifax, Nova Scotia. And they left us out on the deck, when he got off, so we could see him. And they must have had looked like 1,000 Royal Mounties up there. It was a beautiful sight, all these in their red attire and so on. So that was pretty interesting, So we dropped him off there, and we came back down and looked past the Statue of Liberty, which was pretty thrilling.
I was going to say, how'd you feel when you saw that?
Good. I think we cried. They were pretty fascinating. We had a good trip. Good trip back, first class.
Anything else you'd like to tell us about your service?
Oh, I enjoyed the military. Military didn't bother me. If you don't try to fight the system, well, you do pretty well in the military. And once we started to fly, we were done with all the marching and all the discipline. We were flying, and that was it. So we were very fortunate to be, in the Air Force. When I came back, I took some more instrument training down in Texas, and then I went to godforsaken Hobbs, New Mexico, where there wasn't 1 square inch of paved road or anywhere. And I got involved in instruments, and I went up to Columbus, Ohio, Lockbourne Army Air Base, and took their instructor's course. And then had orders to go back to Hobbs. And while I was up there, I had gotten married. And so I said to my instructor up in Columbus, I said, how can I get assigned to this place up there? He said, I don't know. He said, just go into the headquarters and tell them your story. So I went in there and I applied, and they had me fill out some papers, and then I think then I got married, and we drove back all the way to Hobbs, New Mexico, and took leave at the same time. And when I got back there, I had orders to go permanently to Columbus. And my friends down there said, what? They've been waiting for you. I said, how do you do this? Who do you know? So I ended up in Columbus, as an instructor at an instructor's school, instruments. And we were flying all over the place. We'd go out for 12 hours. We'd go to Nova Scotia, we'd go to Cuba, we'd go all the way down to Mexico, the edge of Mexico. So I got to fly all over I loved that. Yeah. Yeah, we flew everywhere. Then when the war ended, I was in the air when the war ended. And the next day, and then I heard on the radio that they were going to turn the lights on at Niagara Falls. And so the next day, two of us, we both took two planes together. We went out and flew over Niagara Falls at night. Right at the day after the war ended. That was pretty exciting. Yeah.
Was that in a B-17 or some other plane?
Oh, that was B-17. Yeah. Yeah, I flew a B-17 out there over my hometown, too. Oh.
So when did you leave the military?
I left the military shortly after the war ended, I think in October 45. Yeah. I didn't dislike the military, but I had moved so many times in 3.5 years. It seemed like all I did was move. I think I moved about 16, 17 times. So I decided I really didn't want to do that. And I had no idea what potential would be for airline flying. I really wasn't familiar with that because I had everything I needed for that. But I had a job waiting for me, so that sort of helped my decision, I guess.
Where was that? Where was the job?
Well, I worked for NCR Corporation before I went into service, and they needed people, so they made a pretty good offer. So I ended up staying with them the rest of my life. No, I stayed with them. Retired at 62. I've been with them like 40 years, including the military time. And then I moved with them. Moved with them, to Pittsburgh, to Ohio, to Atlanta, Boston. Spent my last 20 years in the Boston area.
How do you feel your military experience has affected your life after the military?
Well, I think it gave me confidence. It made me decisive. I wasn't afraid to make a decision. It really helped me in that respect. Because you made a lot of decisions flying, and when it came time to the business, I wasn't afraid to accept an offer to move or anything like that. And I was blessed with my wife, who was, she didn't bat an eye. We moved to another city and get another home. It was, in many respects, very exciting, taxing, heavy, but no, it definitely helped me in that respect. Yeah, it didn't have too many fears.
What message would you like to leave to future generations who might see this interview? What would you like to say to them?
Well, my message would be to stand clear of any conflict unless it's imminent danger, to the people in this country. And, talking about sacrificing the lives of the young people, and the cause has to be stronger than it's been lately. I feel very strongly about that. We can't solve the world's problems, and many of which are religious and have gone on for thousands of years. And we can't change that. No, I've had a good life. I'm blessed many, many, many ways. You know. Blessed to survive combat, which is, you know, only entered the picture in the last few years. I mean, militarily, there were 16 million men, you know, in World War II, and after the war ended, everybody went about their business, and nobody stood around talking in the evening about their experiences. You know, when you had neighborhood parties and friends that you dealt with, you didn't sit around and talk about the military, never. You know. But I guess there's a time and a place.
Do you think there's a reason you didn't talk about the experiences right after afterwards?
Well, it's not, combat's not the most pleasant thing to talk about, and we had our own challenges raising children and so on. You know, that was a forefront more than in the past. The past wasn't that important at the time. So I think it's sort of a natural tendency.
Well, Mr. Bertram, I can't thank you enough for talking to us about your experiences, and it's been an honor and a privilege, sir, to speak with you about it. And on behalf of Parade Rest, we really appreciate you taking the time to do it, and also on behalf of Parade Rest, thank you so much for your service to our country and to future generations as well. Thank you so much.
Well, you people are very kind, and I'm grateful. I thank you for all your efforts in preserving the memories, and the honor should be given to those that are not here. Too many. Anyway, I thank you. I gotta buy lunch.